mean, I never thought I'd actually read those words or say those words, that the law has now been passed.
Yes,
we now have a law that actually does mean that we can send people to Rwanda. One, I don't understand why it's going to take 10 to 12 weeks. Two, if they've booked a flight, who have they booked it with?
Yes. Yep.
And will that end up taking off? Three, these people who are going to be in limbo, hundreds of thousands of them probably by the end of the next couple of years. You know, what are we going to do with them?
Well, Ryanair has offered to fly these people, apparently. So I understand. But
they charge them for luggage?
Yes.
An extra 20 quid.
They'll be able to choose their seat for an extra 20 quid or something. Yeah. The refugee council are absolutely right, but it's not actually the Rwanda bill that is causing this problem.
Right.
What it is, it's the Immigration Act, Illegal Immigration Migration Act from last year.
Right.
Because that actually said, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, and it didn't get that much coverage, that if you enter this country bypassing immigration controls, and if you have you have not come directly from the country from which you are seeking protection, so you've come through a safe, for example, European Union country, and you don't have the leave to remain here, then you either get sent back to, or your claim, your asylum claim, is not valid.
Right.
So if you meet those conditions, your asylum claim, you're not entitled to make an asylum claim under the Immigration Act. Now, what that does is when we've still got all the boats coming, because we've not stopped the boats, it means that we've got people coming into this country who, ever since that act passed in July last year, their claim for asylum, or 91% of them, is not valid.
Right.
So it won't be accepted.
Right.
So they're just here in limbo.
But they can't be deported.
Well, they can be deported back to their own country, but if on a sort of dangerous list, for example, Afghanistan, we can't send them there. So that is why Rwanda. That's why we've got the Rwanda bill.
Right.
Now, none of this actually deters the boats.
Right.
Because we're still not doing anything about the boats.
But also, we can't send that many people to Rwanda because they can only take a few hundred.
Exactly. Now, that is why I suspect we've heard rumours that the government has been in talks with the Ivory Coast, Botswana,
Costa Rica,
Armenia.
But
it's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's
a
bonkers.
joke.
They're addressing, as I've always said, Mike, they are we've got to deal with the people who are already here. That's, of course, a case. And this maybe has part of a role to play in that. But what the focus should be on is stopping more and more people coming here. Yeah. And that is the piece that I just don't see being put on the board.
No. But surely, Andrew, if they start getting rid of some of these people who are in limbo and sending them somewhere, that might be a deterrent.
Well, it depends. And the real key, and Henry and I were discussing this earlier, is that the real question is, do the people know this is what's going to happen to them? Because the whole idea, as we always say, is the abhorrent people trafficking that we've got to target.
Yeah.
But we've got to get the message to people, say, look, if you try to come here, it's not all paved with gold. You're going to be sent away. This is the process that's going to happen. And we've had, 6,667 people crossing so far this year.
Yeah, but that's a bit of a drop in the ocean.
It's nothing compared
to the numbers who are here in limbo.
And it's totally limbo. And this doesn't deal with that.
Still coming. Even if you send some to Rwanda, there are still more coming. And one of the things Andrew says, we were talking about this earlier, and one of the things here is most members of the British public don't have a clue what's going on.
Right.
How can we expect the migrants or the asylum seekers or the economic migrants, whatever you want to call them, how can they... It's only a deterrent if they know that there's going to be a problem in their journey.
Well, presumably most of them know, for example, because they see it either on TikTok or they get messages from people who've got here. They come to Britain, you'll be fine, you'll be looked after.
Well, that's the message that they're still getting.
Right.
They're not getting the message that you are not going to be allowed to stay here.
Right.
And even if they do, then they're getting the message, well, actually, the government's saying that, but they're only going to be able to send this tiny proportion to Rwanda, so you're going to stay in the UK.
And it's the point we made beforehand. I mentioned this movement called Io Capitano, which gives you a different view, because it's actually the people who've been told along the way, this is paved with gold, this is the route you have to do. And they talk about the torture and the murders and that sort of stuff. What we need to do is get that message through the ranks, and that this is going to happen, and it's not paved with gold. This is what's going to happen to you.
But the bottom line as well, and I meant to ask you this when you were on last time, Henry, the problem is no longer just a pan-European one, it's a global one.
Oh, absolutely.
You've now got people being moved from sub-Saharan Africa over to South America and Central America to go into the US via Tijuana, right? So that's all going on as well. So clearly people are moving around the world because they think, rightly or wrongly, that wherever they end up will be better than where they were.
Yeah, absolutely. And because organised crime is not being dealt with. Organised crime is marketing this. You know, they're putting out the equivalent of their glossy brochures saying, you know, Costa del London or whatever, and making it all look very attractive. And once these people are in the grips of organised people smugglers, then it's very difficult for them to escape. Some of the cases that I dealt with some years ago when I was combating this problem in southern Europe was that they would have their passports taken off them. We had them throwing their passports away. But their passports, any documentation would be taken off them by the people smugglers because they don't want this person to suddenly change their mind and say, actually, I want to go back.
Right. And a lot of those passports are forged along the way anyway, so different people. So what was interesting as well, though, were the stats on this sort of stuff, because they say, actually, the vast majority are Vietnamese, followed by Afghans, followed by Iranians, Syrians, and Iraqis.
But isn't that also slightly misleading? Because I looked at these figures a couple of years ago, and unfortunately what you'll probably find is that the largest number are of no fixed country,
you're
because
right.
people don't say where they're actually from.
So
what you're actually telling me is that the ones who are from Vietnam are the probably biggest group of people who identify where they're from.
I think you're right.
Which is not the same.
And we have a problem with our immigration sort of the processing of it, in that we don't have people sufficiently well trained to know whether somebody is saying, you know, I'm an Iraqi Kurd, or are they from Turkey?
Right.
Or it's very difficult unless you have...
As they did with the Albanians.
Absolutely. That was a classic case of that. The Albanian population lives across 4 countries. They all speak the same language. They all identify as Albanian. But actually, where do you return them to? Which country did they actually come from?
And also those who came seeking asylum because of what was going on in Kosovo, suddenly everybody from Albanian sort of heritage came and pretended that they were Muslims under attack and under threat. And that's part of the problem.
But this is what I've said all along, Mike, is that there is no silver bullet. People say, how do you stop the boats? But all of this that we're discussing now is a very complex suite of challenges that we have to overcome. It requires a government approach that is integrated, comprehensive, and focused on what is it we're trying to achieve here. So pulls it all together. You know, the fact of the matter is, and in the conversations I've had behind closed doors, Rishi Sunak has not wanted the Rwanda bill to be any tighter. Rishi Sunak has allowed the Foreign Office to pull or to hold the Home Office back. And we already know that the Home Office is in a mess in this regard. So there are huge challenges here. And without really strong leadership in number 10 Downing Street, leading the Cabinet, pulling them together on this issue, I think we are going to be talking about this for many years to come.
Oh, I'm sure. And one of the things that's going to happen next week, believe it or not, is the Civil Service Union in the Home Office is taking the government to court over the Rwanda bill. You're kind of going, well, that's the first problem, isn't it? That's the first sort of, hurdle to get over, which they probably won't get over. And then we know that anybody they do try and send, whether it's in 10 weeks or 12 weeks or 20 weeks, they will be stopped by lawyers.
It's crazy.
Like all the time that we're talking about this, and all the time the government is failing to be decisive on this, is time during which this country is having increasing pressure placed on its housing, its public utilities, its economy, its society,
hospitals, doctors,
and indeed our entire identity and culture, I would suggest.
And you're not going to get the public behind. When you see the stats, £17 million a day, when we have a cost of living crisis, it's only going to backfire on that. But you say about being decisive, I think they're still missing the point, which we all agree on. It's about communication to the people traffickers and those who want to make the journey, the perilous journey sometimes, that this is what's going to happen to you, and therefore you've got to stop
It's a message of risk to the organised criminals. It's a message of deterrence, or sort of kill the motivation of migrants. And it's a message to the British people that we are actually doing something real and solid about.
And you can warn them.
None of that messaging is coming.
And you can warn them there may be a Labour government when they arrive.
Well, that's the other problem, isn't it? Because they're not going to have any money. They're spending it all on privatising, taking back the trains.
Well,
from
the Labour
privatisers.
government is going to...
Never mind.